people had this feeling that in order to be in an IT or technology organization, you had to be a technologist. And I think that's true to a point. But the good news is we're all technologists every single day. My 80-year-old dad, it's rough once in a while, but he's a technologist. He's using his iPad. He's doing things. So every person interacts with technology more today than they did 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was like, oh, you guys in IT, you know how to do that. Now every single person on a day-to-day basis interacts with technology. And the reason I'm so excited about this is because I think it's going to create broader perspectives and diversity in technology organizations. It pains me that there are fewer women going into technology today than when I graduated 25 years ago.
Welcome to the Change Agent Podcast. My name is Nathan Lesnosky. I'm your host, and we are so glad you're here. This is the podcast where we talk with change agents in the tech industry about the way they are leveraging technology and change within their organization to bring about the mission of their organization and bring about people to be the best versions of themselves. We have had such awesome guests on this program. I mean, we've talked about everything from boating to software development to data to armored cars. And today is something that's really, really interesting, and it's something that you wouldn't always think about in the context of digitization, and that is the window industry. And I get to welcome one of my sort of favorite leaders in the tech space. This is Kelly Aronson. Kelly is the Chief Digital Officer of Andersen Corporation. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Kelly, I would love if we would just start this off by just talk a little bit about yourself. How did you get to where you are today? What does it mean to be a leader and the kind of leader that you are?
Sure. Well, some of you that might have seen me or followed me might know me as the traveling CIO, but I would also say that I'm a little bit of the accidental CIO. So I did not, have this clear plan to get to a chief information officer. That was never my, long-term career goal. However, I found myself in this position just by, I think, always moving forward with curiosity and interest and just saying yes to the next thing that came along. So I actually started my career right out of college at Andersen Consulting, so a different kind of Andersen, and spent some time there and really, again, accidentally found myself in consulting. I went to a job fair at my college, had the qualifications. I was interested in traveling. I had done some work at the computer center at the college. I had taught myself to code. So I had some natural interest in the space, and then started a consulting career, got sent to coding boot camp, and the rest is history, I guess. I spent many years at Andersen Consulting learning a ton. That was when it transitioned to Accenture. And again, I just kept finding new ways and opportunities to learn and grow in the technology space. And it was a really changing time. It was late 90s into early 2000s, and a lot was happening. I had an opportunity to be part of the exciting Y2K conversion, and lots of other technology was really blossoming at that time. And then since then, I've taken other positions at Thomson Reuters and Target Technology Services in downtown Minneapolis, and then ultimately came to Andersen, which was now almost exactly 9 years ago, which is kind of hard to believe. I still feel like I'm the new person at Andersen. But again, came to Andersen in a specific technology role and just kept, expanding my reach, expanding my curiosity, learning different spaces. And about 4 years ago, found myself in the leadership role for technology. And even in that time, it's changed quite a bit. What's in the scope of technology, what our focus area is at the company. And I guess as long as I keep learning and growing, I'll just keep enjoying the ride.
Oh man, that's an awesome story. I want to back up to something that you just said, because I actually didn't know this about you, that you started in consulting at
Yes.
Andersen. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people I've talked to, they're like, whoa, that I would never even think about starting my career in consulting. I thought that was something you did like after you got experience, but I've had a similar experience where like I started my career largely in consulting as well. And I felt like it was like jetpacks to like get the right skills. Like when you think about your role as a CDO now, How do you feel that the skills that you learned early on in consulting got you going? Like, what were those like elements that you learned there that you're using today?
That's an awesome question. And I think you're right. I guess I never really thought about that. I think consulting is one of those perfect bookends. Either do it to accelerate your learning right away, or do it to kind of refine all the experiences and learnings you've had later in your career. And so it sounds like for both of us, we started with the acceleration jetpack. I would always joke that 1 year in consulting was like 2 in the real world. And I realized it was actually because it literally was. You were working 80 hours a week. And so I think what you learned is so much, and it was very little about technology, although I learned that. But it was more about how are you establishing relationships and credibility, especially when you're 21 or 22 years old. And I have a feeling both of us might have looked even younger than that when we started. And so you're trying to convince people to take you seriously. You're going in to organizations, big organizations. I was in financial institutions and trying to get them to share their current state processes with me. And I was working with partners trying to get them to take me seriously. So you have to really establish this ability, this really keen ability to create confidence, trust, and build relationships before you have all of the skills to stand behind it.
Hmm.
I think it helped me develop extremely strong work ethic. I think it helped me establish humility because in those days, some of the tasks you might be doing were less about technology and more about getting everyone breakfast in the morning, making a lot of photocopies, just all of those things. And then I think it's the intangible. It's just the exposure to so many different industries, the exposure to different people and their leadership styles, exposure to big technology transformation before the words digital transformation were said. I was part of big CRM transformations at companies that had a lot of legacy technology. I got to see so many different types of technologies, coding languages, etc. And in some ways, I think what makes me excel at my job today is I've done almost every job in the IT organization. And I couldn't have done that if I had a traditional career path. But I've been a business analyst, I've been a tester, I've written test scripts, I've been a testing manager, I've been a developer, I've been a database administrator. I've had all of those different experiences. So there's not a ton, it might be different technology, it might be different circumstances, but there's an element of most jobs in the technology organization that I've at least had an exposure to the flavor of. And I think there's no replacing that kind of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like what one thing you mentioned there that was really stuck out to me was this like the exposure to really big problems and big companies very quickly. And
Mhm.
almost this like a lot of people get this like imposter syndrome that like I don't, maybe this is too big for me and I can't do
Right.
this, or they'll find out I don't know something. But I feel like what consulting does for you is that like nothing's too big for you. Like you can just land in an environment and you feel comfortable with it, and you feel comfortable being able to make the right relationships in order to be able to get something done. I think the thing that maybe the flip side of that that I'm really curious about your experience with is sometimes when you're starting consulting, it's hard to land somewhere. Like it's hard to like
Mhm.
then be in an environment for a long time because you're used to moving around. Like how did
Mhm.
that switch to then like always living as a consultant in a sense? But maybe some people have said like, oh well, I'm just continue being a consultant just at one company, but
Right.
how did that switch feel to you?
Another good question. I think the moral of my career journey is I didn't have a well laid plan, which is very unusual because I'm a very planful person. But I think you just have to be open. And so this is something I don't share often, but the reason I left consulting was because I had to. I got married. And I found out I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I had her return to consulting, and right away was asked to get on a plane 4 days a week,
Ooh.
and I just couldn't. It was just something I didn't realize was a boundary or a non-negotiable until I had my daughter and realized that's something I can't do. And so that circumstance put me in a situation where I said, I really need to find a job. And I had never been in a situation like that where I have this new child, like a baby, and I was the primary income earner, or at least a significant income earner in our family. And so, what am I going to do, and how am I going to replace this? And that's a considerable amount of pressure in your mid 20s to figure out how you're going to get out of that. And so, it was before LinkedIn, it was before a lot of these different connections. And I guess from a young age, I learned the power of networking and connection. And I physically called people and asked them. And I had the fortunate circumstance of a one of my best friends in college. Her cousin was working at Thomson Reuters. I called her, made the connection, and it's the power of people helping people. And I got an interview with this company, and I was desperate for it. I needed a place to land, and I remember feeling like it was a step back in title and pay. And that was another good lesson to say that's not the most important thing right now. The most important thing right now is that I need a job, and I need a place that I can learn and grow, and I need a place where I can be with my daughter every single night and not travel. And so that was really what propelled me to leave consulting and move into a different kind of job. And there were things I missed about consulting, and I never had that experience, in my first job of understanding like a normal leader or boss relationship, because in consulting you're just so mobile, and I hadn't done like annual reviews, and I hadn't done like HR training, like those things that are
Hmm.
part of like a full-time job. So it was a really good chance to step in and learn those things. And while I did take a bit of a step back in pay and title, it allowed me to go in and feel really good about the skills and capabilities I brought to the organization, and quickly show them those skills and capabilities, and ultimately propel myself. And that company is where I had my first management position. And so, again, I think if you think too much about the components of those steps in your career, and you just don't, you got to trust your gut and your instinct a little bit. And it was a great decision I made at the time.
Man, I mean, that's a lesson for all of us is that you, the choices that you make are really what define you. And the fact that you make the choices that are really valuing the things that are truly valuable, not necessarily the things that, might be this sort of thing over here that might be more flashy. Like that, I mean, that says a lot about a person, and it says a lot about
Hmm.
probably the results that that's produced in your life, not just in a sense of like, what did I just do of my job? And that's of course something we value a lot, but just the fact that like I can look in reverse at my life and know it turned out the way I wanted to or was hoping it would because I made
Hmm.
these choices. That's really important. Like and it
Yeah.
something that I would really respect about that kind of choice.
Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. So I want to pivot a little bit to like you're traveling, you're the traveling CIO, you're all these experiences that you've had this year. And like as you are closing down the year, and well, like, even just like let's talk about just that before we even talk about what's coming up.
Okay.
Like as you like, what does that give you exposure to? You were a consultant. You moved to Thomson Reuters, in Andersen. You're leading Andersen. You're getting exposure around Andersen and what that looks like, and you've experienced that over the course of the year, and like you're planning for the future. Like, what has that told you about like who this organization is and what you need to be for it now? Like when you look at the organization as it stands and what the experience like, what have you learned from these different stopping off points that's told you
Hmm.
something about the people that you're working with?
Right, right. Well, I'll give you a little backstory on the traveling CIO. So one, I love to travel. That's always been embedded in me. And I found this out in college. Um, I really wanted to study abroad, and I had never left the country. So I decided that the first time I would leave the country, it would be for 7 months around the world,
Oh,
where before cell phones and practically the internet. And so that was my immersion into travel, and I've never looked back, and I love it so much. And so I'm always thinking about ways to integrate it into my personal and career life. And then fast forward to this fall, I've been really intentional this year about um, LinkedIn, and thinking about what kind of brand and presence I want to have in that community. And I started looking ahead to my fall schedule and realizing I had a lot of travel coming up. And I thought, well, that would be kind of fun to maybe in the month of October, just call it the traveling CIO and talk about some of my journeys. And part of it was a lot of times people say, well, why do you travel? What are you doing with Windows? Like, why would and IT, why would you be traveling? And the answer is there's just a multitude of reasons, and you can always find different reasons to travel. But I think it's so important to get out, and that might come in a lot of different forms. So my travel brings me to our different manufacturing locations. I
Hmm.
think it's super important to be out there, even if we have one or two IT people there, to connect with them, to see the places that they're working on technology and digital solutions. Nothing replaces being in person and seeing those places and connecting with the people. I go out to different conferences. I went to a Gartner conference that wasn't even necessarily focused specifically on IT, but HR this fall because we're working on a broader HR transformation. And so I went out with some HR teammates. So it was part of connecting with them and then being out and being part of learning and growing and gaining additional insights in that respect. I took a college trip with my youngest daughter, who's looking at colleges. We did a college exploration trip, and I decided, hey, I also have a personal life that I can share in this community and talk about that kind of travel. And so, it can be all sorts of different reasons for travel, but that's ultimately what I thought would just be an October kind of feature and talk about me getting out and about. And then the funny thing is, it seems like it really caught on, and I would go to places and they'd say, "Well, we want to be on your traveling CIO blog, so take our picture." And so it's kind of morphed into something, and it does seem to be getting a lot of traction, and I'm having fun with it. So I'm reflecting now on how I might carry that spirit into 2024. But again, I think it's really easy to get comfortable in your office, whether that's a physical office or a home office, and talk about technology. And for me, I've always been someone who wants to be and connect with the people and the places and where the technology solutions are coming to life, because that's where you have your greatest learning.
Absolutely. I mean, I was reflecting with a coworker that I've never, in being in consulting for 22 years, I've never known a time where technology has been so close to the mission of the business. And
Hmm.
it's not about like, I remember when I was getting started, like I was like that guy in the back room that like dealt with the network and the PCs and this and that, like, and you just came out to do your computer guy thing, and
Hmm.
now, like, it is so much in the fabric of the organizations that we work with that just going, I can understand how like just going to the locations is super meaningful because it's so embedded in what the organization's doing. Like, and I think that's just why it makes this time so exciting for us, that it's like it's not just about the tech anymore. It's about the mission of the organization itself.
Well, I'd love to build on that because I've had that same epiphany in 2023. And it seems weird that it's an epiphany. You and I have been in technology for over 20, 25 years. Like, how is it just now that we're realizing that technology is part of the fabric of the business? But it's different. It's true. Um, technology did feel like a separate entity that was there to kind of pull upon or support the business in different ways. And, during my time at Andersen, it's been really important for me to say technology is not an order taker. Technology is not, um, it should not be a road blocker or a stopper. And I started using words like strategic partnership the last several years, but it's even different than that right now. And I think, I talk a lot about, as an organization, many organizations used to have a strategic focus of technology, including our organization. But we made an intentional change a little over a year ago to say technology is not one of our strategic focus areas or pillars. Technology is embedded in every component of our strategy.
Hmm.
And I think to say that our business objectives and digital objectives are intertwined, like you said, and the digital is a thread throughout our business is going to look different in the coming years. And I'm excited about it. I don't know exactly how that's going to manifest, but I think that it's going to become so integrated that it's going to be less separate. And so part of that is there's so many different facets of technology. Sure, there's your core infrastructure and operations, but there's all of the digital components that support and impact our business functions in different ways. How we support marketing is different than how digital supports finance and so on. But it's unmistakably embedded in all of their business imperatives. And so I'm really excited, and that's kind of fueling my excitement in 2024 is how do we show up as our digital organization? I've stopped calling it IT or even technology, but how do we show up as a digital organization and say we're your partners in understanding your digital portfolio and how digital drives and fuels your business.
I like that term. How do we show up as the digital? And I think that's awesome. Like it's, um, I was thinking about this in the context of like many businesses that started in the software industry, they just naturally are software companies, right? Because that's what they build, right? But I could see how manufacturers sometimes that can be harder because they build a thing and then like that thing as it becomes more digital in nature, naturally, just because maybe I build a garage door that's a digital, digital garage door, but like it starts to become a natural part of the product portfolio. But even that is like a step to getting truly to what does a truly digital extension of our mission look like? And how does that not just even become an extension, but actually the way we execute on the mission? And that's where really what you're communicating is like, no, like it's not like we have technology and then we have our mission. Like it's the same thing. They work together.
Right, right. And that's so interesting. I've never thought about it quite that way, but technology isn't our product, right? It's easier when technology is your product to see how it is so intertwined. And I think you're right. The next kind of step change is technology embedded in your product. And we have some of that, but that's not really the ultimate destination. It's more how does digital and technology fuel the entire ecosystem of our business
Hmm.
to create a world-class experience? That
Exactly.
is what we're after. And so it's not always the tangible technology behind that. It's how technology creates positive experiences and how we market to our potential future buyers. That's how we show up in their homes to show them, what that window buying experience can look like. It's how we provide multiple channels that they can engage with us to service their windows. So all of those components, it's it's in support of that product and ecosystem. It's not the product itself. And so that takes more intention, I think, of saying, how do we then embed that digital as part of the overall experience?
Hmm. When you think about the skills of the people necessary to be able to execute on that idea, how has that shifted and changed the way like how have you thought about to how about the enablement of that? That's been one of the most difficult things I've seen in some
Mhm.
companies. Like they think of like technology as a role rather than a skill. And I'm curious like how you've thought about helping that to become a thing across the organization.
Well, I'm really excited about that. I think it's an evolution and I think it's shifting in a really positive way because I think people had this feeling that in order to be in an IT or technology organization, you had to be a technologist. And I think that's true to a point. But the good news is we're all technologists
Hmm.
every single day. My 80-year-old dad, it's rough once in a while, but he's a technologist. He's using his iPad, he's doing things. So every person interacts with technology more today than they did 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was like, oh, you guys in IT, you know how to do that. Now every single person on a day-to-day basis interacts with technology. And the reason I'm so excited about this is because I think it's going to create broader perspectives and diversity in technology organizations. It pains me that there are fewer women going into technology today than when I graduated 25 years ago. Like that is really hard, for me to understand and comprehend when we're putting so much into STEM and other things. It pains me that we don't have, we are still kind of trying to find ways to integrate diversity and different perspectives into technology. And I think, now is that it's been a really intimidating kind of career choice to go into. And so what I think is we will have better technology organizations when we have broader diversity, but when we also have representation from our business units in technology. And so I am a huge fan of having people take roles in our technology organization that come from our different business teams because they bring a different perspective. They work with the technology with a different kind of sense of how that technology helps their day-to-day business. And so I think the more you can commingle those experiences and have people come into to technology that might not have that traditional background, your kind of rewards are just going to be so much greater. And we're creating technology solutions for the masses. We're not creating technology solutions for technologists. And so you need to be able to commingle a lot of skills and experiences into your organization to have the results that I think you want to achieve.
Yeah, that is a huge point that like by not just the expansion of skills, but it's actually expanding the diversity of creativity across the organization and what people are capable of. We've kind of so focused on like this very like specific set of tech skills like coding and such that sometimes like excludes people who might be more focused on creative or artistry or
Exactly.
business analytics or something that's like you wouldn't necessarily like we wouldn't naturally always say is like, oh, this is a tech job, but like ultimately isn't every job a tech job in some sense, and that's kind of where
Exactly.
we're going to get to.
Hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. Like I think that's like a huge thing for us to even think about like in general is how that's going to change our businesses over the next 5 years even.
I think it's a big unlock. And then you think about the students graduating, even in the coming years, and how much exposure to technology they've had. But again, you need a good representation. So that could be generational, that could
Hmm.
be tenure. Like, I think that, it's always having that right mix of perspectives that's influencing your digital experiences.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so all that ingested into this, how is all that organized the way that you're thinking about 2024? Like this is a big year for technology, man. We've got all this AI stuff happening, we've got digitization, we've got transformation of businesses, skills economy. Like, what's on your mind as you enter into 2024 and you seek to prioritize how you attack that year?
Yeah, I love this time of year. So we're talking now here in late December in this time period between Christmas and New Year's. And I think it's a very unique and special time of year. And it's one that I seek to spend doing a lot of reflection and thinking about what worked this past year, what didn't work, where we had opportunities, and then how do I fuel that into the upcoming year. And I think there's so many different things influencing us in 2024, especially in our industry. So we're looking at interest rates, which, in the past year have been higher than they have in a long period of time. And so we're actively watching that to see how it influences both new home construction and existing home sales and remodels. We're watching the broader economy for changes. We're watching the geopolitical environment, how it acts, as a conduit to just consumer confidence and spending, but also access to resources around the world and how that influences us. We have an upcoming election year,
Hmm.
which kind of came as kind of snuck up on me anyways. So that is a big influencer in our industry, especially in our business division that's direct to customer, because we're competing with media and advertising against an election campaign year where more and more money goes into that, and so it's just greater competition for mind share. And then
Oh,
it also impacts consumer spending. So there's so many macroeconomic components going into the year. And then I think we are thinking about those things that we started in 2023. And as much as you get excited about starting new things in 2024, I think a big mission for us will be let's finish what we started. And some of those things were post-pandemic things that we've started and really need to complete before we get distracted with a lot of new things. So we have a lot of multi-year programs and transformations that are in flight, and it's going to be really critical to continue to guide those important initiatives through to the finish line. We're watching a lot of the emerging technology and participating somewhat. I think it's trying to find that right balance of not being swept up in the buzz and getting distracted, but also not ignoring some really exciting developments in AI. And so, what's that nice landing space to be able to consume some of that, show value to the organization, but not be on a mission to find a solution or have a solution looking for problems to solve, but rather what problems are we trying to solve, and might some of these new and emerging technologies be interesting solutions for them. So just kind of finding that balance. And then I think 2024 for me is how do we educate and elevate how digital shows up in our organization. And so how do we have new conversations with our leaders, with our senior most leaders around how technology is part and embedded in their business function, whether that's marketing or finance or supply chain. So just to kind of baseline where we're at with the technology solutions that we've added and persisted over the last several years, and start doing more joint strategic road mapping sessions together instead of having a business strategy independent of technology solutions or a technology roadmap independent of business circumstances. It sounds so obvious, but those things have to be very intentionally interwoven. And so I'm excited to use 2024 to be on an education and evolution campaign and figure out how we continue to just transform how we think about digital in our business.
Totally, totally. I mean, I like a lot of what you said there because it was like it was a combination of how do I use 2023 as a completion point? I need to follow through on what I had originally said I was going to do and complete those things and not look at it just as something that like I'm just going to sweep under the rug like a New Year's resolution and everything's fresh and new from the ground up. But then in the same sense, like there is a whole set of new activities that you're going to be doing as well, and you have to kind of combine those two things together.
Mhm.
So I thought that was a really healthy like way to think about that. That both of those you have to think about the new year as a fresh start, but also in the sense of it being able to be a follow through on the things that you really invested in, and not that like the things that you invested in initially, they're not just like, oh, I'm just done with them, and they didn't have any like follow through activities. Like, yeah, they
Right,
that's a building on of what I did before,
right.
not just a restarting. So I think that's huge. Like, because I think there's a temptation for us to always look at the new year completely as a new year with everything
Mhm,
before being a sunk cost, which can
mhm,
be a good
mhm,
thing sometimes, but
mhm.
oftentimes not.
Right, right, for sure.
Um, I how do you balance this is sort of a forward planning question on like prioritization, and don't go into this any more than you feel comfortable going into it, but like
Mhm,
um how do you balance the like threat in the market, or maybe the wrong way to maybe that's a way to say it, but like um inbound forces, like economic inbound forces. This is what's happening in the economy. Here's what's happening from a strategic standpoint with interest rates, all that element to your existing business against the opportunity zones, which may be things that you're not doing now, but are, if I had to start the business completely over again, I had nothing. And I was going to build a business that had these technology elements available and skills available to me. All the things that, like, if I had to have the perfect opportunity now I would have ready, and I went after that opportunity independent of all the like other forces. How do you balance that? Like how do you balance the, maybe another way to say it is the defending the existing business and making sure I continue to succeed there versus the mission of the business is broader than the way I sell it today. Here's this other
mhm.
set of things that I'm going to go after, and it's going to take forward investment, forward activity. It's not directly the initial business that I have now, but I know I need to do it because that's where my competitors are going to come out of that I'm not currently competing with. Just kind of curious, like how in your organization you even think about that problem.
Yeah, I think it's an art and a science. And I think it's something that companies are always balancing. I think our company has done a really good job of continuing to play offense. So understanding even with like the inbound forces, making really good strategic investments and being thoughtful about where we're making those investments. Being part of the technology organization, a lot of times we would just in any organization kind of receive the outcomes of those business decisions. And now it's exciting because we're more part of the conversation and the dialogue because they all have technology implications.
Hmm.
So there's not a strategy or decision that's made that doesn't have some element of technology. And so it's exciting. It's an exciting kind of maturity level in technology organizations to be at the table, have those conversations, and think about the broader strategy. I think the key is playing offense and being flexible and nimble. And I think that our technology organization has shown during, through, and after the pandemic that even more than most organizations or most functions in the business, we have a great ability to be flexible and nimble. If we need to dial down, we have the ability to do that. If we need to accelerate in certain areas or multiple areas, we have the ability to do that. And so I think that puts us in a really good position going into 2024, where there's a lot of uncertainty, but we're not approaching it with fear and we're not approaching it with conservatism, but we are approaching it with wisdom, thought, strategy, and even excitement about the possibility about when those forces are tough. That's your moment to take share.
Hmm.
That's your moment to double down. And that's your moment to show up for your customers and do that in a way that elevates you above the rest. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great answer. Just the ability to be. I like that word wisdom, right? It's this idea of the what's gone before us, understanding the ability to intake all of what that looked like before, but also an ability to slowly, maybe kind of intentionally look toward what's going to happen in the future and being able to respond to it in a way that isn't fearful, but in a way that's also like the appropriate level of caution and go get 'emness. It kind of goes together. I
Exactly.
love the
Yeah.
play offense. That's a great. It's like
Yeah.
you're watching a football game. They say they have great defense, but they can't score. Well, you got to score something.
Yep. You need both. You need both.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so man, this has really been a great conversation so far. So the last the last kind of like bookend question I want to ask you is probably my most the one I love the most, which is to tell me about like the influences, like who has made you the kind of leader that you are today? Like who's influenced you with the skills, capability, the wisdom, the all the traits that you've been talking about through this journey? Who's enabled you with those traits? And just tell me a little bit about that person or persons.
I have a few categories. This is so hard because so many people have influenced me. So I will say the first category of those people that have influenced my career is every former leader or boss that I've had in my career journey. And I recently was in a conversation with someone. They asked me who my mentors were. And I said, well, every past boss I've ever had, I like still stay in touch with them and I still get together. And they said, that's so unusual. And I didn't realize it was unusual, but I guess it is. But I have the very first person who took a chance on me at Thomson Reuters and put me into my first management position in my 20s, leading a couple developers to give me the experience of what that was like that ultimately propelled my passion for leadership. I have my former leader from Target who at one point then became my peer, and what she kind of created for me and advocated for me, and also was my leader when I experienced the loss of my mom during the time that I was at Target, and just provided me so much support and counsel during that tough time. I had another leader from Target who continues to be an important mentor for me today, who I get together with, who I ask a lot of questions about leadership and technology and approach. He's had multiple CIO positions, and so he's someone I feel really safe calling and asking him how he would approach different things. So I've created unintentionally, but I guess intentionally, in my decision and commitment to those relationships, to say that they continue to influence me. They know me more than most people do, and that they provide a really safe place for counsel. And I'm always looking for how I can give back to each of them. So that's a really important tribe for me, is that collection of previous leaders I've had. The last one, my a leader that I had in my current when I first came to Andersen, who's now retired, he continues to provide me counsel over happy hour, text, anything. And so just it's a really special group of people that I hold in really high regard, and that took a chance on me in different ways, knows me better than sometimes I know myself. And each of them provide me different kinds of counsel. So that's an important group to me. Um, another singular person who's impacted my life so much, who there's been different times over the years where I didn't want to always admit it, but I'm going to just go bold and say I'm obsessed with Oprah. I listen to all of her podcasts. Super Soul Sunday, I read the books. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but just like her perspective on gratitude and life and balance and resiliency have been just driving forces in my life, and I think has influenced my perspective there. So, and then the last group I would say is probably my daughters. I think, I talked about how my oldest daughter, not by her own design, influenced my career path when she arrived on location 20 years ago. But both of my daughters have just, I think I aspire to be someone that can show them imperfection, attempting to balance, attempting to prioritize those things that are most important to me, showing them a female that can have a career and have a family, and you can't do that perfectly, but I think showing them that sometimes it's messy, but it can be really rewarding, and just showing them kind of the strength in fighting for what you want and the life that you want to have. So they've been really important influences on me as well.
Wow, those are awesome. I mean, what I took from that first group was having a collection of people that you can be vulnerable with and can give you the advice that you might not always want to hear, but is the right thing to hear and helps you to make the right decisions is so powerful. Like we need that personally, we need that professionally, we need that just as people. And I so respect like having that group of people that you can bounce those ideas off of and feel that they'll give you that kind of like trust that they'll give you that feedback,
Absolutely.
and that's awesome. And then like totally right. Like we always have like the Oprah, like the person that like they're like a trailblazer in the
hmm
society and they
hmm
give you the courage to be the kind of bold person that you know you can be. But
hmm
sometimes you need the kick that like if they're
hmm
doing it, like I can do this, or like here's this.
hmm
That's awesome. And then I love you talking about your daughters. Like I could so connect to that because like I feel like the same thing as a father of daughters, like how much you want to be both vulnerable that like you don't have everything figured out, but you also
hmm
want to give them that bold like you can do anything, like kind of
hmm
capability. And then also the combination of you're going to have to make choices. Like you can have anything you want but not everything you want, and you need to figure out like
Exactly.
what that is for
hmm
yourself. And
hmm
the combination of all that together as a parent, I feel like that unlocks in us, like, man, being a parent unlocks in you so much.
It sure does.
In a good way and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
other ways, but
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing all those.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, that is the end of our podcast this week.
Wow.
And I am so glad that you took the time to do this. This has been an awesome conversation. Man, what a like a journey through all these topics.
Been
And
great. I've enjoyed it.
thank you for spending the time and being part of it. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to learn more about your journey over time. So thank you for being part of the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. It was a great discussion. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. And we'll see you all next time on the Change Agent podcast.